All right, I'm going to tell you something I'm not proud of, and I want you to decide if I was protecting what was mine or just protecting my ego. 3 sentences, then you judge me. I followed my maid after work because I thought she was stealing from me, and what I saw that night didn't just shock me, it cracked something open inside that money had kept sealed for years. If it were you, what would you have done? My name's Desmond. And if you'd met me a year ago, you would have said I had it all figured out. The mansion with the glass that mirrors the sky. The cars that whisper more than they roar. The kind of calendar that makes you look important, even when you're just running from yourself. I built walls, not fences, not gates. Real walls you carry inside, the kind you decorate with trophies, so you forget they're prisons. After a few betrayals, you start pretending caution is wisdom. You say things like, better safe than sorry. You tell yourself kindness is a luxury you'll get back to when the numbers stabilize. You know what I mean, right when your heart is a locked office and access is on a need-to-know basis. That was me. And this is where Doris walked into my life, quiet footsteps, careful hands. A voice that never took up more space than necessary. She kept the house running, like it was a living thing, and I treated her like a useful shadow. Polite, distant. No questions asked as long as the marble gleamed and the plants didn't die. Then the pattern shifted. She started leaving early, not every day, but often enough to light up the dashboard in my head. She said her mother was sick, hospital visits, early checkups, appointment numbers that sounded real enough to pass, and still something in her eyes made me wonder if there was a second story running under the first. I heard her on the phone one afternoon, speaking Igbo too quickly for me to catch more than the urgency, the way the words broke and reformed like a river against rocks. Money, she said, the way people do when they are trying to keep their voice steady. I told myself I wasn't suspicious, I was responsible. Yeah, that happened. One evening around 6, the Lagos light went soft and gold, the kind of warmth that makes even the concrete blush. I saw her from the upstairs balcony, 2 nylon bags head down moving fast, like the day was closing, and she still owed it something. Doris, wait! I called, trying for calm, and landing somewhere between a question and a command. She turned, eyes gentle but guarded. Yes, sir, did I forget something? What's in the bags, I asked, and I hated myself for how much I needed the answer to be wrong, so my suspicion could feel like wisdom. Groceries, she said. Small smile, not the kind that hides a lie, the kind that hides a life. You ever hear your gut say, this isn't about the bags, and still you push ahead, because control is your native language. That was me. Here's the part I'm not proud of. I went back inside and opened her HR file like it was a case file, like I was a detective, and compassion was evidence I needed to rule out. Everything checked out, references, ID addresses, dates that lined up, which made my mind work harder to find the one seam that didn't. I remembered a crumpled slip I'd felt in her coat pocket on the hallway rack when I'd moved it to dry after the rain. So I went back to that pocket and found it again, a bank transfer for 200,000 naira to Enugu, a name I didn't recognize at the time, Ima. Mother. You'd think that would settle me right, but people who live behind walls find a way to doubt sunlight. I told myself I'd ask her in the morning. I told myself I had the right to know where my trust was going. I told myself a lot of things that sounded reasonable and felt like fear with a tie on. Friday came. She mopped the dining room, the smell of disinfectant mixing with hibiscus through the open window, and said in that quiet tone of hers, Sir, I'll be leaving now. My mother has a hospital checkup early tomorrow, and I also have some things to handle tonight. I nodded, said, Take care. Watched her step through the gate. listened for the click of metal against metal, that little punctuation at the end of her day. Then I picked up my keys. Go ahead and judge me, I deserve it. I slid into my SUV seat, lowered mirrors, tilted the kind of hiding that looks like a crime until you tell yourself you're protecting your home. She didn't call a ride, didn't flag a cab. She took a yellow Danfo bus down to Ajagunle, the city tightening from wide highways to narrow streets, shop signs fading into the heat, kids darting and laughing, the rhythm of Lagos turning from headline to heartbeat. The bus stopped. She got off. She walked with purpose past a row of buildings until she reached one with peeling paint and a sign that said Umu Learning Center, evening classes, food support. Wait, that's not what you expected, right? I parked across the street and watched through the window, feeling like a thief, stealing a view of something sacred. Inside a few tables, a chalkboard older than most of the chair's fans humming like they were tired but stubborn. And there she was at the front, not wearing a uniform, not carrying a mop, not hiding. Teaching. How are you? She said, slow and steady, tapping the board, smiling, when the room tried and stumbled, patient when they tried again. An elderly man tripped over the word hospital tongue, heavy vowels unsure, and she knelt eye level, repeating the sound, breaking it down into pieces he could hold and fit together. The room felt alive, not with noise, with dignity, that soft electric dignity working people carry when someone finally meets them where they are. That sound you hear when your old story collapses, that was inside my chest. I didn't breathe for a full minute. Tell me honestly, what would you have done in that moment? Walk in and apologize, drive away and pretend you never saw it, or sit there and let the shame wash over you until it had cleaned something? I sat. I watched. I let it break me just enough to start again. I went home with a different silence than the one I'd cultivated for years, not the empty kind, the kind that says, pay attention. You might be wrong. It was late midnight, ticking toward morning, and I started searching the center's website, a simple page with photos that shouldn't have hit me that hard, and did. We offer free evening English classes to low-income adults and new arrivals from rural areas. We run entirely on small donations, rent overdue, roof leaking volunteers buy food with their own money. In picture after picture, there was Doris hugging students, handing out bread and bottled water, laughing in a way I had never seen in my house. I called my assistant David, the one person who knows the map from my better intentions to my actual actions, and said, get me the numbers. He did what he always does. No speeches, just facts. 2 months back rent. Borrowed spaces when the rain got bad. No sponsor. Doris listed as lead volunteer, unpaid. A second job at a small supermarket on weekends. Another part-time gig cleaning offices. My house Monday to Friday. I stared at those lines until the screen blurred. The next morning I wired 5 million naira to the center. Anonymous. No press, no plaque, no selfie, just a note that said, we believe in your mission. I called a contact in Enugu and cleared a hospital bill. If you want to call it guilt money, okay, but it felt closer to penance, or maybe the first honest thing I'd done in a long time that didn't need an audience. Question for you. Would you have told her it was you or kept it quiet so the work stayed bigger than your name? Be honest. That evening I parked across the street again, not like a spy now, like a pilgrim who finally found somewhere to set down the burden he's been pretending isn't heavy. I watched the way the class changed with a little more food, how nervous laughter turned to proud cheering. When the older man nailed hospital like it belonged to him, how Doris seemed brighter, not because of the money, but because the room could breathe. I went home and for once slept like a person instead of a ledger. At dawn, I found her at the kitchen table, hunched over a notebook, with a pen moving fast, the small rechargeable lamp casting a little halo that didn't know it was doing something holy. "Good morning," I said, softer than I usually sound, and she looked up, eyes startled, smile automatic. "Oh, good morning, sir." "What are you working on?" I asked, and she did that quick shuffle people do when they've spent their lives treated like help. Hide the masterpiece because you weren't hired to have one. "Doris," I said gently. "It looks serious." She sighed, the kind of breath that tells you the truth is knocking anyway, and turned the cover. A title stared back at me. Invisible Brilliance. Why skilled Nigerians from rural areas are forced into survival jobs in the city. I felt the floor tilt. She wasn't just teaching English, she was writing a map for dignity, charting the distance between a midwife who delivered 100 babies and a clinic that wouldn't hire her to clean floors, because her paper wasn't stamped between a generator repairman who could build a radio from a drawer of parts and a city that decided he was illiterate because his grammar limped. She talked and I listened about the friend who was a trained midwife in Owerri, now cleaning offices at night, about the man from Kogi, who could fix anything electrical pushing a wheelbarrow in the market, about the way people are treated like blank slates when they already carry libraries. I had nothing to add. I had everything to learn. I run a foundation on the quiet education and youth development. Mostly, and yes, the irony is noted, a man with more money than he knows what to do with funding little programs while hiding in plain sight. That afternoon, I brought Doris a file community outreach director, full-time, proper salary benefits that would let her mother breathe, and the center plan, and a blank page labeled Programs for Prior Learning, because I wanted to build what she'd been dreaming. Not teach from scratch, build on what people already know. She touched the folder like it was a hot pan. "I'm grateful," she whispered, "I really am. But I'm afraid of leaving the front line, afraid I'll turn into someone who talks about help more than they help, afraid people will think I chose money over purpose. Do you think that's fair, to fear that success will steal your soul? Or is that fear the tax the poor pay for daring to step up?" I told her it wasn't either or, that we would write the job around the community, not the other way around, that she'd spend days in classrooms and nights in planning, that the board would listen when she said no. Fear doesn't evaporate because a man with a title says, "Trust me." Fear lives in the bones and asks for proof. I didn't have enough yet. For a while, the house felt like an airport where people move efficiently and no one belongs. "Good morning, sir. Good morning, Doris. Thank you. You're welcome." Silence. One Friday, she knocked on my study door and handed me an envelope, resignation, 2 weeks. My throat tightened, my mouth did something it hasn't done since I was 20 and broke. It forgot how to shape words. I nodded because I refuse to be the man who straps golden handcuffs on a woman and calls it kindness. Those 2 weeks were a museum of small goodbyes. The way she hummed when she watered the palms, the way she tied her scarf, when she mopped the second mug of tea I kept setting out, like muscle memory was calling her back. The night before she left, I knocked on her door and handed her another envelope, recommendation letters, detailed, true, the kind you write when you owe someone who never asked for anything. She looked at me like I had handed her a key and a map and said, "I'll keep in touch." We stood there, 2 people on the edge of a door that closes softly and still breaks your heart. 3 months is a long time when your house knows the shape of a person and keeps asking where they went. I filled my days with meetings you can conduct on autopilot if your face knows how to perform concern. I told myself I missed routine, not her, because sometimes the lie is a pillow and the truth is a stone. Then one morning, my assistant brought in an invitation with a blue wax seal. Umu Community Center Annual Gala, Honoring Miss Doris Ezer Volunteer of the Year. I told him to RSVP before my pride could say no and call it boundaries. The gala was nothing like the charity nights I used to attend. No chandelier, no flower wall, no silent auction to buy vacations you don't have time to take. String lights overhead, round tables with white cloth and paper flowers made by hands that learned to read in that very room, elders dressed in their best kids with signs taped to their shirts. The air braided with Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa pidgin, and that thing you can't name until you hear it. Hope. She walked in wearing a blue Ankara gown with gold-trimmed posture, like a prayer, and something in my chest stood up to applaud before my hands did. When they called her name and she spoke into the mic, I felt the room lean forward. "I used to think no one saw me," she said. Voice steady, "but now I see all of you, and that is enough. You ever feel proud of someone you don't have the right to claim? That." After the speeches, she found me near the back where men like me stand so the spotlight won't have to argue with our shadows. "Thank you for coming," she said. And I said I wouldn't have missed it, which is a sentence that means more than it sounds like. She hesitated the way people do when a truth has been rehearsing in their mouths for weeks. "My mother's surgery," she said, eyes wet in that shiny way that blurs rooms. Someone paid the whole bill anonymous. And that same week, the center got a donation, 5 million, also anonymous. If I ever meet the person who did that, I don't know how I'll thank them without crying. There it was, the twist I didn't see coming when I followed her bus. Not the money, not the surgery, the choice in front of me. Keep the secret and stay safe behind it, or tell the truth and risk everything I had rebuilt between us. Secrets have a job. They keep you from intimacy and call it privacy. I was tired of that job. "It was me," I said, and watched the sentence land, watched her recalibrate the last 3 months of her life. "You did that," she said, and it wasn't a question. It was a door creaking on a hinge. "I followed you that night," I told her, "because I thought you were stealing from me, and instead I found you pouring yourself out, so I did the only thing that didn't feel like a lie. I helped without asking for credit." She held the plaque tighter, as if steadying herself. "I didn't ask for charity," she said, and the way she said charity made it sound like something that stains. "It wasn't charity," I said, "it was love." The room got quiet in me, not outside in me. I felt scared the way men feel when a word shows up that money can't control. Do you think that's fair to call it love? Or does that word feel like a glove rich people put on when they want their hands to look clean? Tell me in the comments, I'm listening. She didn't rush to forgive me. She didn't smile. She said the thing I needed to hear, the thing most people are too tired or too polite to say. I spent my life building a backbone plank by plank so I wouldn't collapse when help didn't come. Finding out you were holding the ladder, I don't know how to feel about that. I told her what I knew to be true, that what she built is hers, that the donation didn't author her story, it only removed a few storms so the plot could keep moving. I told her she changed me not in the pretty way people say after a good speech. In the ugly way, change happens when your ego runs out of alibis. I used to rescue people because it made me feel strong. I said now I want to serve because I finally understand what strength is for. She searched my face for the tell. That flicker of ownership men like me betray when we say partnership and mean permission. She didn't find it. She found a man who was tired of being a vault. We didn't kiss under the string lights like a movie trying to clean up after itself. We stood there in the hum of a room that knew joy made from scraps and said maybe without saying it. Later I flew to Enugu to meet her mother. I sat in a living room with tiled floors and plastic chairs, ate pounded yam, too slow, called her mama. and meant it got my vowels corrected by aunties who have never been wrong in their lives. By Sunday, Mama looked me up and down and said he's too skinny, but his heart is full, and I will defend that verdict to my dying day. We got married in the center where everything began. No planner, no choreographed dances, just soft white paint, hand-painted murals of alphabets and books, ceiling fans that did their best kids running around with paper flowers. When she walked down that makeshift aisle in a simple yellow lace dress that had belonged to her grandmother, I forgot how to breathe. The vows were our own. I thought love was a weight, she said, voice breaking and steady at the same time, but you taught me it's a hand to help carry it. I'm not choosing comfort. I'm choosing courage with you. I said less because my mouth is brave only when it has to be. You taught me that wealth isn't what I hold. I said, it's what we build and give away. I'll be your partner in purpose, not just a donor with better stationery. When the pastor said, "Kiss your bride," the room shouted, like we were all punching a hole in the ceiling of what's possible. We named the foundation after our families and turned Doris's thesis into a blueprint. Recognition of prior learning. Exams that translate rural skills into city credentials. Apprenticeship pipelines. Pair a market electrician with a licensed mentor and flip the gatekeepers from hurdles into coaches. Clinic partnerships. A program that lets trained midwives from small towns shadow in urban hospitals and test into roles that match their skill instead of their paper. Micro grants. Stipends for volunteer teachers tied to hours and outcomes, dignity baked into the model, so help never feels like hush money. I handled the logistics, the contracts, the meetings where you explain the difference between charity and justice without making the donors feel like you're scolding them. She did the heart work. Training teachers, sitting with grandmothers in crowded clinics, telling women their voice matters, and then leaving a structure behind so she didn't have to be the voice every time. We argued, of course we did. She said I move too fast and risk turning people into metrics. I said she holds the line so fiercely, we sometimes miss the moment to scale. We were both right and both wrong, which is what partnership means when you're doing something real. She would come home with names and faces, and my spreadsheets would feel like they needed to apologize. I would bring in a grant with 10 conditions, and she'd say we'll do 9 and push back on the one that steals our soul. We learned to disagree without breaking. We learned to say, "I'm sorry," without a defense attached. One afternoon, I took her back to the classroom, where I'd first watched her through a window and felt my excuses wilt. The walls were new, the windows opened, the fans hummed like they had hope, and above the whiteboard there was a small gold plaque, the Amara Ease Learning Room, where every voice matters. She touched the letters like a person who understands the difference between recognition and worship, and said, "I don't deserve this." I said the thing I know now. Merit and grace aren't rivals, you earned it, and the rest is gift. She cried the quiet way she cries, the way that doesn't ask anyone to fix it, just asks them to stand still and let it be beautiful. Now I'm going to ask you something that might make the comments a war zone. And maybe it should, because polite silence is how we keep broken systems comfortable. Is help from someone who holds power over you ever truly free? Or does it always come with a shadow you learn to live under? Do we need to tear down every ladder and build elevators so help isn't personal at all? Or is the truth messier? That we build fair systems while still allowing human generosity to move in the gaps? And what about love when the two people aren't equal on paper? Is that automatically a story you reject? Or can it become a place where power is renamed and redistributed, where decisions are co-signed, where money listens? Do you think that's fair, or does it still sound like a story rich people tell to sleep better? Here's your mini call to action before I wrap. Stick around, because what happened next in our city surprised even the cynics. Companies started calling to ask about our prior learning exams because they finally realized their talent shortage was a language problem, not a pipeline problem. Hospitals signed on to our midwife track, and we watched women who had been told to mop floors put on scrubs and teach first-year residents how to listen. The center expanded to 3 neighborhoods, not because of a viral story, but because the people in those rooms took what they learned and taught somebody else. We started publishing our curriculum in plain language so anyone could run a class in a church hall or a market stall, and you know what they did. It wasn't neat. It was good. It still is. I followed my maid because I thought she might be stealing. What I caught her stealing was my certainty that money makes you wise. She taught me to count different, to measure my life in the number of rooms where voices get louder because they have permission to exist. If it were you, would you have followed her to find the truth, or asked and risked being lied to? Would you have donated anonymously or put your name on it so others like you might feel safe to join? Which moment hit you hardest, the classroom reveal or the gala confession? Tell me, argue with me, show me where I'm still blind. And if this story moved you even a little, don't let it die in your chest. Share it with someone who thinks second chances are for other people, not them. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story that might pry open a door you've been pretending is locked. Drop a comment. Disagree if you need to, I can take it. Or tell us about the teacher who changed your life, the boss who finally saw you, the night you chose curiosity over fear. If you're building something like this in your city, leave a note below so people can find you and show up. I'm Desmond, and tonight I measure my wealth in voices that finally got heard. Thanks for listening, for staying, for proving that love and justice aren't opposites. They're partners. Careful, thoughtful with your eyes open and your hands ready. I'll see you in the comments, and maybe if we're lucky in the work.